Thank you all for coming today at our field day for in conjunction with Timor West Landcare and Farming for Sustainable Soils. We've called it Breaking the Barrier because that's the problem we've discovered and we're trying to solve. Myself, I'm the President, Dr. Peter Sale, put your hand up. Phil Dyson, right in the front here, and Christian Bannon. They're our main gurus today, who got the knowledge about the soil and can probably help us solve our problem. Mary Nipson is the coordinator of the Farming for Sustainable Soils. Brian Mullins is our secretary, he's going to feed us later. Got an apology from Ken Beasley, who was the manager of this Renew program that we started off with. He's up in Darwin or somewhere like that, I think, enjoying a bit of sun. But we've got it here today, so we're right. The demonstration farm, now we started this in 2014. That's just the manpower. The project funding was Timor West Landcare Group was in association with Project Renew, which is a program to reinvigorate communities and also to find out a few things and also for conservation. So it was a good program and we got up a demonstration farm out of that, and we're continuing that with the Farming for Sustainable Soils. The other funding organisations are there. Now our problem was this, that we had a layer in here. It's a bleached layer that is concrete in summer and soup in winter, and the roots can't penetrate that to get to the better soils and clay and moisture below. So we're trying to break that barrier. There's a good reasonable topsoil on top, but not much of it. And it's very erodible country too, so got to treat it gently. We started off with we'll now progress on and go up and have a look at the breaker slope, work our way back. Look at things, we'll have lunch here and then we'll get into the discussion of the heavy lifting. Corner there on the right, and we'll stop and have a look at Jade's plot there. Pastures on the left, and below that is the grazing shrub trials to see what's stand up to grazing and whether we can get a bit more productive and bring more nutrients up from the subsoil and break that barrier. Then we'll go down and check on the disaster area and the grazing saltbush, then A12, and we might be late for lunch, I think. So just all happy? Any questions up here?
I'll just make a few comments,
Yep.
if that's all right, Ken.
Go
If you look down there below us, what do you see? What does the landscape look like? Yeah, but what's the shape of it? It's flat, isn't it? Now look up behind us here, basically, and what do you see in amongst that? What sort of rocks? Granite, yeah. So this is a granite landscape, but down there we don't have granite sticking out of the ground, we don't have hills, we don't have those kinds of things. So what we find in these granite landscapes is they're not all the same. There's probably 4 or 5 different styles, and granites go through this process where they come up, they decay, they break down, they get pushed up again, and they go through that cycle again and again. And clearly that's the case here, where we're dealing with an old landscape that's been repeatedly weathered and eroded. Granites have got typically 3 major minerals in them. One's quartz, one's a mineral called feldspar, and the other one is mica. And the last 2 break down way ahead of the quartz. So when they break down, we're left with the quartz behind. And that's our issue here. The quartz is separated out from the clay. The clay's down 1/2 metre or 60 centimetres, and the top 60 centimetres is is something akin to very fine beach sand, basically. And like Ken said, it sets like rock in the summer and it turns to slush basically in the winter. So this is a unique landscape. If you go over that hill there, you're dealing with something that's totally different again. You go north or south, you're dealing with something that's totally different again. So we have this kind of landscape in a number of places throughout central Victoria. But in this situation here, it's probably one of the toughest environments we've seen, and we're still trying to deal with it. So using the word soil here is an exaggeration. This is really a geological layer that's sitting over the top of this landscape, and we're trying to build a soil in it so we can farm it. It's not something that we've done to this landscape, it's something we've inherited. Okay.
So Phil,
Peter.
Given that the granite and the history, nevertheless, I guess we've got a recharge, discharge configuration in this little mini landscape.
We've got a groundwater system that operates in here, but it's a little one.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's coming out of those hills there, it's going down the landscape here, but really, as a groundwater system, it hasn't got much depth to it because it can't have it. 5 or 10 metres down, it's hitting solid granite, and that hasn't got groundwater running in it. So, in that sense, if you can head that water off by intercepting it up here, you have a big benefit. But as Ken also said, when we've looked at the numbers, the last 10 years the drought has made a big mess of that groundwater system in that it's dried it out quite a bit. And I guess what we're really trying to do here is to prevent it re-establishing itself. Yeah. Okay.
I'll do it. Move on to the next slide.
So I guess I'll just say a few words first. Our cover crop trial was just behind you over the fence there. When we sowed it, obviously it was a little bit late for this area, and we were trying to get organised and sow a couple of cover crop treatments. So we came in quite late in the season, bare as a board underneath, and quite tough getting through it sowing, quite cloddy as well. And I came back here every once in a while and had a look at what we'd sowed, and I actually, one of the days I walked in because the gate was locked, and I realised as I came through quite why the species weren't really getting up out of the ground, because it was pretty hot walking up here. So we did sow a cover crop trial over summer, and it was probably too late, but nevertheless we did try some species. You can see over there's a couple of tillage radish that have obviously survived and germinated at some point, and there's a little bit of canola as well. So we tried quite a lot of fodder species, broadleaves and grasses in there, but just evidently not the summer to do it, and probably not that late in the season either. So we'll come back in this year or next year in autumn and do an autumn sowing of those cover crop species as well, and see what we can get off that, and then perhaps work on a spring or a summer cover crop sowing a little bit later. So that's a wrap up of that.
And this paddock that we're standing in, I think this is where we've direct seeded some weeping Tagesasti. You can sort of see the rows where the yeoman's plough's gone, but it wasn't as successful as what we'd hoped. The seed, for whatever reason, didn't really take, and we got a huge flooding not long after it was seeded. So yeah, we were a little bit concerned that she might have been flooded out as well. But I think this is, yeah, we're just trying to remedy that. We've got some more seed. I think Ken's actually been reseeding some of it, and we hope that we can actually do a bit of in the actual in between the rows, use some covers next year, maybe using some legumes or mixes. That way we can sort of, you know, use the protection from the actual the growing Tagesasti as well, and have a complementary type of thing, because obviously you don't want the it's a waste to leave the rows go to weeds. It's good to have the diversity of different species in it and sort of give us an idea of what may work in this setting as well. As Jade sort of was talking about, this country is probably more like you've got to have things in the autumn to get the length of season, because we've only got a very shallow topsoil. We don't really have the moisture available to actually get something to take over the summer. And as she said, it gets so hot, like the soil temperature, it would be interesting to actually look at what the soil temperature gets to over the summer months. It's just too hot for the plant roots really, and for the persistence. So we'll put our heads together, Jade and I, next season, and we'll, as I said, we'll try and do a few different things and utilise the moisture over the autumn and winter months to get something to lead into the summer. But as I said, I don't think that this country is really suited for stuff to be sown. After the longer stay, it's pretty hard to get anything established. So,
And that was underneath the dirt.
How long would that been grown? That seeded there when you put in last year or something?
Yeah.
It's come up this year.
Absolutely. So I've no idea how long that's been
Still
growing.
From when you sowed it last year?
No.
way.
When I came over in the summer, there'd really nothing been germinated. So I suspect it's germinated
Seed might be sitting on the ground and germinated.
on the autumn break.
Yeah.
Yep. And at this stage, if you have a look, it's still not really potted up and the seed's very green, so it's still growing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously it's sitting all by itself in that paddock, so it's got room to move and to grow. But if you terminate something like this and it all rots down, obviously you're getting a huge amount of organic matter in, but you're also getting all that infiltration through into your soil. So, and
And the penetration, of course.
pardon? No, we really bunged it in last year into some pretty tough country. So yes, it'd go straight down.
Ken's going to go butcher's hook at you now for digging that up.
Yes, he will, won't he? But to have those taproots getting down and into the soil like that, it's just wonderful. So, and this was all the one. So
Where'd you find that?
Oh, that was on that one.
so I reckon it's come off
Oh.
possibly there. So
Ken, was this where the Tagasasti was direct seeded when we were standing? That's what I thought.
We found one plant down there.
Yeah. But
So tell me about this plant you've got there. Is this actually gone through the break?
yes, it has. So we sowed in summer last year, and obviously nothing much germinated then. But it's obviously come in on the first autumn rain, and there's a few scattered plants in the paddock, and they've just grown from autumn onwards.
So this indicates what can happen.
Yes. They're usually not quite as big as that. That one is a monster. Usually they're probably this,
you can do
or a bit bigger. So if you have a paddock full of that, obviously you're really aiding your compaction and aeration and getting a bit of organic matter down into your subsoil. So they can work very well on those types of soils.
That's amazing.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Digging around.
I'm not hopping in with my belly.
You wouldn't fit. see, that's just.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty friable.
Yeah. And
Yeah, there's
well, there's the layer. You can sort of see it.
You can see the layer there now. See the
Yeah.
across
But
there.
that's pretty handy. That's 20 centimetres of top stuff, isn't it?
Yes, that's friable in the. It's probably going to more to. See, it's only sand.
Yeah.
So is this indicative, Ken, of most of it?
Not really, I don't think. I think this is more laming right through.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, we'll find out over there anyway. But
In the other paddock there, when I dug my shovel and was working there the other
Yeah.
year, that layer was
dig
really
and it
pronounced,
goes
isn't
bang
it,
on the
down
shovel,
there?
yeah.
It's not-
And it was whiter, was it?
Yeah.
Yes,
Under there goes into a whiter sand.
Whiter sand.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we found a bit of better country.
Yeah. But maybe.
It's not growing as well as what it should do, you know. There's something limiting the growing in this one. So whether it's just the nutrients,
Well, they probably leached through because of the friability.
yeah, could be that.
Too much sand.
Want some deep tillage radish to bring them up again.
I think it's nutrients would rapidly leach down.
Yeah.
So where's how far is this down, Ken? Where's this layer? There's all roots in there. Where's that? How far is that?
There's the stuff we don't like, that very fine sandy stuff. So at this stage the moisture's down there and it's friable. Any wetter and it goes to soup, and then in summer it sets to concrete. So
Oh, that's it just there. How far is that in there?
there's your layer there.
It's actually from Anglite.
Yep, and then you go. Yeah, you've got a layer right down. You get to there, you get start to get in the clay.
So that's where this stuff is. Deeper
Oh,
down.
just underneath it, is it, Cam?
So that's your sort of layer from there to there. You find there.
So the roots get in okay. You know, the plants are in there now, the roots,
This isn't
but nothing for them much. You know.
Oh, sort of layer.
Yeah, and no nutrients and not much water. You know, another 6 weeks, water's all gone. Maybe. Would you say, Rennick, would that be the picture?
like
You know,
sandy soil.
The useful profile roots can occupy, but there's not much water there for them.
Majority of the roots are on the surface, not deep.
Yes, but you know there are little roots through there,
Yeah.
but you know really
Not a lot.
not a lot.
This gentleman beside.
So it's not 4-ton wheat country, if you know what I mean.
It was 4 tonne of maize.
In a good year. 2016 with manures.
Yeah.
God, he likes to embellish, doesn't he?
It's damp, but it's inhospitable for roots. To a degree, there's one there, but it's not much getting through there.
Right now.
Yeah. So that's that layer, or barrier. So if we move on down along the other track and we'll just wander in and have a look at that pit over there. I'll take his tool along, I guess.
We started rehabilitating this paddock at the beginning of 2015. I took some soil samples. I did the 0 to 10 and then 10 to 20, and we sent them away to Soil Food Web Institute to get those soil biology records just as a baseline. And there was pretty much no cover on here. The odd melon, it was just, it was March, it was hard, it was really dry. It just come through one of the worst seasons. So yeah, it's certainly come a long way from there. But by utilising the biomass that we had last year, and that's really mulched and protected, there is a distinct difference pushing this in here versus where you've got the standing stubble up the end. So. But as I said, at the beginning of August, I could just pretty much anywhere I stopped in the paddock, you could hear it squelching as I'd push it in, and I could do it with one hand, and it would only go up to about 300 psi. So, and I mean, when I'm talking about that, it's the pressure that it's taken me to push that probe in, and it's got like a little bit of a gauge on the side of this thing. Up to 200, there is absolutely no plant roots can grow freely, and then up to about 300 it starts getting a bit tricky, and from then on pretty much plant roots wouldn't have enough energy to push through the soil at that pressure. So yeah, it's a good tool to actually see what's going on, walk around the paddock and just see what moisture's available really. So but anyway, I'll let Christian take over and talk a little bit about the soil pit and what we can see in there.
All right, thanks. Everyone else can join in too, because I haven't really had a look at this. So different to the last site back up here. Yeah. Yep. So I only saw it from the seat of the digger, but pretty deep sand over clay, exactly as Phil described up on top of the hill. The transition from sand to clay is abrupt, and your bleaching occurs throughout the entire zone from bottom of A1 around 10 centimetres through to the top of clay, but it gradually gets worse and worse, and right on that interface on top of clay is where it is worst, and that's where we tend to find our limitation to root growth at its worst, as Mirren just described. have you? Do you want to give everyone a rundown as to what happened in here and what we're like? I'll have a dig here and start having a look at whether I see what I'm finding. But Merrin will tell you as to what you did here with the trials.
Yeah.
We dug one pit there and we just thought this might have been slightly better.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
We've just gone, as you can see, the post at the end there. That's where one of the subsoil manure lines went in last year. So we just thought it would be good to show what's happening at depth and to see if there's been any movement in that organic matter that's been injected. This site began like this time. It would have been March last year when they had we actually had the subsoil machine here with Southern Farming Systems, and that's when, as you could see from the diagram that Ken had up this morning, the first treatment, it actually went this way, across the paddock this way. So Ken could probably tell you a bit more about the treatments. I think up the end there was a yeoman's plough, wasn't it, Ken?
Right. On the end was yeoman's plough, and that was a control plot. There's a steel post there, white one, silver one, and down the end there where we dug the pit, because that's also control there this year, that little block on the end there is a control that's only had super and balancer clover on. The whole lot had 2 tonne of lime and 2 tonne of gypsum, but apart from that, no compost on that far end block, except for this year when he top dressed these 2 blocks here, but there's been no compost on that bottom corner where we dug the first bit. And this one certainly is showing up a lot better than that soil over there. If you scrape that stubble back and pick up a bit of dirt, it's like garden soil there. It smells beautiful, very friable, a lot of bugs in it, and it's certainly different than when we started.
That's certainly what Ken was referring to this morning as the barrier. It's not entirely structureless, but it's one of the most poor zones in terms of soil structure between the surface and subsoil. So here at the surface, I was interested to hear what Merrin and others have said about this site. It was obviously a tough site before they started. Through what they've done through their process, through working it, tilling it, applying fertilisers and sowing it, an abundance of roots has picked up in the surface. This still remains the problem zone in here, because as this subsoil dries, it shrinks, and as it shrinks it cracks, and you can see here these roots are all moving straight down these cracks. And everywhere I break that down, if I broke that down under a microscope, I'd see a blocky structure continue to maintain, but roots are ultimately in the cracks. I don't know if it's fair to say or not that they're not necessarily going through clay subsoil. As soon as they shrink it, they grow around the aggregates. So as this dries, it shrinks and roots can push down, but in a sandy loam or a light sandy clay loam, these are sandy loams, even moves into a clayey sand, is that as they dry they set like concrete. When they set like concrete, they're effectively structureless. So that's the barrier that Ken's talking about, and that bleach here, I'll just try. Manure in. So there's manure in here, and the top of the manure is about 150 mil below surface, and the bottom of the manure is about 200 to 250 mil below natural surface. The standard thing with the manure, whether it's led to a response, or the chicken litter, whether it's led to a response in production or not, what's interesting is that there is an abundance of roots around it. What Merrin was talking about this morning was the chemical characteristics of manures do change. We had similar trials put in up at Lockington with the Lockington group, and around the manure we did not have one single plant root that had even come near it. But sure enough, in this zone around the manure that had been fractured, there were a stack of roots, and yet the cattle manure, and we had a number of other trials. We had the cattle manure and they had lucerne pellets and so forth. On every trial, all the treatments other than the manure had an abundance of plant roots around the actual manure itself, similar to what we've got here. So this to me is a little bit different. There could be a lot of reasons that have caused that. There may have been a lot more rainfall since this was put in, and hence we've been able to move some of the nutrient, move some of the salt or whatever it is that makes this an unfavourable environment in its raw state to a very favourable environment. I believe that's probably the most likely thing is rainfall between when it's put in and when it's assessed. So what's promising about this site on face value is we've got in our clay dominant subsoil here, we have got a lot of plant roots, no matter where I look, and they've managed to get through. The question is always, has the ripping been the dominating factor? Is the ripping and the manure the dominating factor, or is it other agronomy issues, time of sowing, better fertiliser practice, etc., different species? They're always the questions that we're trying to ascertain from this work. You can see here that if you went across and continued a long section and had a look here, you would see that in my view, I would root score this probably 8 or 9 out of 10 in the A1 in the surface, then probably back to somewhere around 3 out of 10 throughout this bleach material, possibly 2 out of 10, and then in subsoil underneath, I would probably, that root score is variable depending on where you look, but I'd probably give that something in the order of 6 out of 10. Obviously, you don't need as many roots in a clay necessarily to get the same performance out of it as you do in a lot of textured soil, because these roots are clinging to the side of clay and they're extracting moisture and they're extracting nutrients out of it. But all in all, whatever's happened here, I think, has been a fairly positive response.
Christian?
Yes.
What I think is happening is that the manure
yes.
is absorbing that limited rainfall.
Yes.
It's capturing that rainfall, preventing that from going deep down,
yes,
and holding it in the winter and allowing the crops to have that connection between topsoil and the clay. As you said, the clay, there's not a lot of restriction for roots to grow in the clay,
yes,
but if the plant germinated and hit that
yes,
layer, which is like chalk, I mean, if you remember the day subsoiling was done, the machine was moving at about 20 kilometers an hour. Just so powdery stuff where we drop the stuff. It's very different to what we see today.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because a good indicator to confirm exactly what you're saying has a lot of merit is that the manure is bone dry and it's full of plant roots. Mm-hmm. So you've got a crop response there. Is it moisture? Is it a nutrient loading in the manure? Or is it a combination of both? It's probably a combination of both, and the fact that the plant roots have been able to get down there quite quickly. But I never forget looking at, we saw the same thing at Charlton too, Phil, where we use mainly cattle manure up there, but we used duck manure on another trial. But yeah, most of the trials I've looked at in the first year, there are not a lot of plant roots. When was this put in?
This is its second year.
It's second year. Okay, that's
March
sorry.
2015.
Sorry.
15, March 2015.
15 or 16?
15, March 2015.
Yeah, forgive me for my
Yeah.
for not
As you can imagine, it was so barren here. As in, it would just look like a moonscape. It was.
Yes.
Yeah, there's not much here, and the opportunistic plant. Occasionally, you'd see a melon here or whatever, but that had just found a spot to establish. But yeah, there was virtually no cover. And in March, you could imagine the empty profile pretty much.
So do you think that then the manure is sort of energising the roots? They get down into the manure, and that gives them the energy to push on down and explore deeper.
I certainly think that
just creating that connection, Peter.
I do think that the nutrient response is pretty easy to quantify. You do the numbers on manure, and there's a lot there.
Oh, yes.
Once plant roots push through, whether the manure is there or not, once they break through this bleach layer, they then push sideways. And soils are always 8 to 9 times more permeable horizontally than they are vertically. So it's very difficult to make a call and say yes or no. But what you're saying, I agree 100% with what you're saying, is that you've got a nutrient loading here which is possibly supercharging the root system and the above ground biomass, but you've also broken the back of this problem I think I'm firmly under the belief here that that you wouldn't have had roots in the first year, but upon saying that, we had a wet year.
Yeah.
We had a very, very wet winter, and it was just wet, and it's, if anything, it's probably done this site justice, and it's probably done all our trials justice, I reckon, around the region. Yeah, so can everyone see that bleach layer here? This is the topsoil. This is the layer we're talking about, and should plants push through there, then they're away, but obviously the subsoil manuring and all of the soil amelioration trials are targeted towards breaking that barrier.
Christian, the objective here, wasn't it, right from square one, was to get the roots through the barrier. Number one, yep?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, if we're going to score this as success out of 10,
Yes.
what's our score for getting roots through the barrier?
Good question. Through the barrier, based on all the practices we've done here, I'd say 10 out of 10. Whether that's the subsoil manuring, the weighting you can place on each thing is very, very difficult. This question comes up every time.
Yeah. But you've got to qualify that by saying at this site, because we've got a lot more clay in the soil.
At this
there's
site.
a lot. It's
Under
a lot
the
easier
conditions
to do
at this
here
site,
than what it
yeah,
is
but
up there.
Miriam, if we go back to this site, 2015, 2014, this was a moonscape, right?
Yeah.
And we had no roots through the
Nothing.
barrier. Would that be right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so let's limit it to this site,
Yeah.
and you give it 10 out of 10, Christian.
Oh, absolutely. They're not very often do you root score medium clay soils in the B1 horizon from 15 to 40 centimetres at root score 6 or 7 out of 10. Very rarely. Even where they're strong, cracking, angular blocky clays, 3, 4 and 5 out of 10 for me is about standard everywhere. So that's a pretty good result.
So you've got pretty happy roots.
I think so, yes. Yeah, and what it's telling me is as long as we don't get this 35-degree heat wave we're talking about, it will hang on for a while.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to hang on more than other paddocks.
Yeah.
That aren't treated this
But
way.
I think that the conversation needs to go a bit further than that, is that when this hangs on longer, this dries out more.
They'll hold anyway.
Sorry?
They'll hang in anyway.
Yes. So when this dries out more, it comes back to what we were talking about, this water balance issue up here on top of the hill, is those trees, we like to say to ourselves they intercept the water, but what those trees up there on that breaker slope are doing with subsurface moisture that moves in and flows this way, is they're dewatering the profile. So the profile can hold more water. And when the profile can hold more water, below field capacity, it's not going to move through like this. So similar thing happens here is this crop dewaters the profile. So next year, when it's March and everything's dead, but there's actually moisture over here below 20-30 centimetres, and here it's bone dry to 60, moisture is going to move through that profile. It's going to take nutrients with it. That clay is going to be cracked. The surface, the topsoil has been busted open. Down those cracks we can move topsoil with organic material, with nutrient, with lime and with traces of gypsum, and we can make that zone better again. So in order to make any of these profiles better, or in any area, and you were saying it was a moonscape, is we've got to try and use more. We've got to use more water. We've got to use it more efficiently where it lands. What we've done here is kick this in the guts, and got the process started. So we could go into a conversation all day about the cost effectiveness of it, but in terms of soil, I would have to say it's a pretty positive response in this region, on this soil type. So the process that's been employed here has led to root growth that was deemed to be very, very good. I looked at the surface and you can see that root score is probably 9 out of 10. We've still got an issue in that bleach layer, and then below in cracking clay subsoil we've got 7 out of 10. But what appears to have occurred is the tine by ripping and the placement of manure has allowed roots to move through passages of this bleach layer, or the barrier that we spoke about this morning. So once those roots have moved through, they can then push horizontally out sideways, and I think that's the key observation here. Putting a putting an actual value on whether it was the ripping or the manuring is always hard, because in the first year roots don't tend to grow around the manure. In the second year, once nutrients have pushed out and what could be simply the salt content or the manure is diluted from rainfall, you have good root colonisation in that manure. That was what we saw here. There was an abundance of plant roots in the manure. So yeah, I wasn't involved with the trial right at the start, but it's pretty obvious that that the combination of a ripping and the manure has led to an increase in root development at depth.
So advice for anybody else farming around here?
Don't be scared to try something. The bleach layer is not the same everywhere. It's not uniform. It goes up and down on a paddock basis. Don't just go and rip the crap out of something because you can. Don't just go and put subsoil manuring in just to sort of see how it goes, I suppose, because it's expensive. But certainly the takeaway message is that there are things that can improve production in this country, and all the information from others in the group, and as I said, I haven't been involved right from the start, but all the information from others in the group says that this was pretty tough ground before we started here, and now we've got tillage radish, we've got oats, and we've got clover, and we've got a number of other species growing. So it certainly worked. It's taken investment in time and money to do it, but be confident that there are things that can be done to our soils from an amelioration perspective that will yield better production, and ultimately what we're trying to chase is better water use efficiency on country that's tough. We've got tough country everywhere, and these are acid soil, deep acid sands or a shallow acid sand with a bleach over clay. Yes, there are things we can do.
University, Greater City of Bendigo, and the Northern United Forestry Group. They were the four groups that came together, I guess, to form Renew. Renew was funded through the HMST Trust, Helen McPherson Smith Trust out of Melbourne, and we set out to do a project in 3 years. So 6 years later, we've actually got it.
Any other questions? Oh, answered all your questions already. We did have some vigorous discussion down the paddock. So. Yeah, go on.
I just might make a few comments, just my personal learning experience today, and that is that we came out, Rennick and myself and another chap, we came out in December 2016. I was on the phone to this guy and said, come on, we're going to check these where you've done the subsoil manuring. Yeah? So we came out about in the second week in December, and it was a little disappointing, Ken, wasn't it? Really,
a little bit on that paddock.
What we wanted, it was it was difficult to quite know where to look, but we did find where there was manuring done, sort of, and so we looked at the barrier, and the barrier was still the barrier. It was hard as cement. Didn't you think? I thought it was. I thought, oh my God, this is a lost cause almost.
I had a slide up before where the line showed up very clearly at certain stages of the year, but by harvest time they disappeared.
Yes.
We needed to drain up.
That's right. So we said, okay, well look, there may not be a lot in the crop, but what's happened to the matrix of that barrier? Have we opened it up at all? And my conclusion was at the time, and Rennick, I think it was no progress. We had failed, we hadn't delivered yet.
Oh, to a degree, yeah. To
a degree at that stage. However, today is the 21st of September. 9 months down the track, at the end of the beginning of a spring after a fairly useful winter, not a wet winter, but a useful winter. Yeah. And Christian, brilliant stuff. Really, it was really good to be able to get that renovator, to get that digger. Excavate is the word. One look is worth 1,000 words, isn't it? And actually, with the work that Rennick and I've been doing over many years with the subsoil work, the most spectacular results were with the excavator, because then we could see what was happening. Anyway, so what we learned today is that it wasn't all over, Ken. It wasn't a failure. In fact, what was the score he gave us?
10.
10 out of 10. And this was for getting roots through the barrier. That was the objective, because that was the problem with the barrier. We couldn't get the roots through. Okay, so look, the roots were getting through, and maybe due to extra nutrients or whatever, the mechanism, we probably don't quite know, but they were getting through. And this was a vast improvement, Merrin, wasn't it, really? Things are looking up, yeah?
Well, on behalf of my wife and family, I'd like to thank you all for coming today. We've been working at it for several years now, and we just hope that shows that something's been done over the years. It's nice to see you all here today anyway. Thank you all for coming, and I'm sure, I hope you've had a lovely day.
Tell me about today, Phil.
Oh, look, today was a really important day for us. So with this group, we're kind of 4 or 5 years down the track. We've had a go at the issues here under a couple of different programs. One was Renew, which we've heard about this morning, which was a consortium of organisations wanting to do something about rural communities and welfare and repairing the land. And the second one, more recently, is with the Farming for Sustainable Soils program, which is funded by the National Landcare program. And both of those organisations are really appreciating the fact that if we're going to make change to the way that we manage the land and have our soils sustainable into the future, we've got to find new ways of actually managing it that put back the organic matter, put back the soil structure, and get our soils working again. So we're all heavily into, or getting heavily into, regenerative practices now, and trying to find them and working with farming communities in an effort to find them. We're trying to give the responsibility, I guess, back to the farming communities for managing their own soils and supporting them with the right kind of people, the right experts, letting them run their own trials, letting them find solutions that work in their part of the world.
No, it's gone off very well. I think we've sort of proven that what we were set out to do has actually come to pass, that we've broken the barrier and got the roots down to that subsoil where there's moisture and nutrients. So all the other projects are coming along nicely, and a very successful day.
My perspective of the day is that it's a wonderful day because it shows what happens when government puts money into projects like Project Renew and Landcare and farming for sustainable soils. And it's all about educating people about Australia's farming lands, because we know that when Europeans came to Australia, they didn't really understand the land systems. And it's wonderful now to see that people are really making a serious attempt. And so, and the other wonderful thing is that a farming family, like the Wiseman family, would devote this bit of land that we're on now as a model farm where you can try things out, try ideas. No one's got the real answers because nature's a very complex thing, but people here are trying, and today it was quite exciting to see that some soil had roots right down deep in an area of land that was marginal land for doing anything. And here, because of a procedure they tried, there was actually roots right down. So a very positive sort of day about what can be done when people have access to some money that they normally wouldn't have, and can try out ideas. And it's really a grassroots trying. It's not people coming down from on top telling people what they best do. It's these farmers themselves trying things out and learning from it.
The future. Great to sit down with 30 or 40 different-minded people and just have a discussion around soils, around well-being, you know, of our land and the associated issues. So, you know, absolutely wrapped in that, but it's also about people's well-being, isn't it? Just being here myself, I've had a great day and really enjoyed it. So, sensational stuff.